Welcome to How Soccer Explains Leadership. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and I hope that you and your family had a fantastic Christmas last week, and I hope that you're preparing for the new year to begin and to ring in 2021. You know, again, this week we have something a little different for you. You know, we are going to, just as last week we introduced to you the Coaching Character Podcast episode 1, where you learned about the show and you met Coach Rosler, my co-host in that show. This week we're going to give you the second episode of that new podcast. And the reason we're doing that, like I said last week, is to introduce to you this great new show, which I have no doubt that you will enjoy the conversation that I'm able to have with Coach Roz. In this episode, it's actually similar to the episodes that we have here on How Soccer Explains Leadership, in that it is an interview with a man named Harrison Phillips. He is a defensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills and a fantastic young man. So I have no doubt you're going to enjoy this episode, this interview, what you're going to learn from Harrison, and really just give you an idea of the Coaching Character Podcast. If you really like it, you can go ahead and subscribe to Coaching Character as you hopefully have done to How Soccer Explains Leadership, really. And if you haven't done so for How Soccer Explains Leadership, I do encourage you to do that right wherever you're listening to this. Just click on that subscribe button. But if you really like Coaching Character, you can learn more about it at theplaymakers.org. You can also subscribe to it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you find your podcasts. So, the last thing I want to mention to you, I want to remind you, as I said, subscribe, but also join the How Soccer Explains Leadership Facebook group if you want to go deeper in the conversation that we've been having on How Soccer Explains Leadership. I want to thank you for being a part of this show. I want to thank you for your downloads, and thank you for just your engagement. And I do hope that if you have any guests that you think we should connect with, send them my way. Info at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. Drop me an email. Give me feedback there too, because I really do appreciate that. You can rate and review the show as well. As we kick off 2021, we're going to have we're going to continue the great new content from How Soccer Explains Leadership, and I have a few surprises for you in the first few weeks of the year. Look forward to sharing those with you as well. So again, I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope you're preparing for a great new year, and I hope that you really enjoy this second episode, the special edition of How Soccer Explains Leadership, the second episode of the Coaching Character Podcast. Thank you very much again for being a part of this show. I want to wish you a very, very happy new year. And now I want to introduce to you again the Coaching Character Podcast. Welcome to the Coaching Character Podcast, where we coach coaches to coach character. Here are your hosts, Coach Roz and Phil Dark.
Well, hey, let's get started, Phil. You know how excited I am about this. I've talked about Harrison. It's all I talk about around here, and we've got him with us, and you're gonna learn what a special man he is, and So let's get going.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the first interview here on the Coaching Character Podcast, and from what I've read and from what I've heard, Harrison, you're a pretty special guy. So I'm looking forward to our audience getting to know you, and hopefully this will be the first of many appearances you're making on this show. So Harrison Phillips, you are currently playing with the Buffalo Bills. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All righty. Well, you know, other than that, I'm sure there's a whole lot more to you than playing for the Buffalo Bills, from what I've read, from what I've heard. And, you know, I mean, one of the things I know about you is you're one of the few men that I've ever seen that makes Coach Roz look small. You make him, like, you'd probably make me look like a little lollipop kid, because, you know, I'm a bit shorter than Greg, and you're like, I don't know, you must be 7'3". But anyway, with that, I'd just love to hear a little bit and share with our audience, just who you are and just a little bit of your story and how you got to be on this show as you're playing football, talking about coaching, character. Why the heck are we talking to you right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. I don't know if we have enough time on the podcast for me to get all the way into it. I guess Greg likes to give me a hard time sometimes for how big my head might get at some point. So, I mean, long story short, we had a very fortunate upbringing with a village that poured into me and supported me in every way that I could. But I saw enough struggles and went through enough shortcomings and adversity and trials and tribulations through whether it be injury, whether it be not making varsity, maybe my dad losing his job a handful of times and the financial instability that came with that. Got myself to Stanford because academics were instilled in me. Like I said, this great village of different people. There was a teacher here, my mom, my dad, my sister. Again, some of the best role models I had were coaches to help push me and mold me. And I think the biggest, most instilled thing into me was, hard work. And I know that's like a cliche that everybody says, but I really do mean that to a T. And I mean, when you read about it in the book that Greg and I wrote together, there's a few references I make into there about, how that, if I had to pinpoint it on anything, it would definitely be back to hard work or dedication. Went to Stanford, excelled there on and off the field, graduated early with a double major, an honor, and a minor, and then was blessed enough to be drafted to Buffalo in 2018, going on my third season this year. And, it's just been a blessing to look back now that I'm a little more older, a little more mature, and take time to actually smell the roses while I'm here now, not knowing how long this NFL journey could last, but also appreciating the things that got me here, whether, how thick or thin they were. Obviously, I had an injury I had to overcome, a couple injuries I had to overcome. Anytime that Greg and I have gotten together, a lot of great work has been done. I mean, you can see it in the now thousands of kids' lives that we've affected in a positive way. And, it's great that we are starting to get more and more things like this. We was started with just a volunteer football camp that I went and served at with some high school kids is now transformed into books and podcasts and nationwide football camps and work with kids with developmental differences and special needs. And so, if anything, a story about me is a story about relationships and a story about hard work. A story about faith, and I just think the culmination of doing the right thing, good things will happen.
I absolutely love that. I love a couple things about this. One of the things you can probably see on the video if you're watching video, it's like I'm sitting across a table from a proud dad. First of all, so that's really cool. The second thing is I love how you said it's all about relationships, right? And I remember reading in the book about a couple relationships that you made in junior high. You currently work, as we talk about the book, we kept been talking about this book, and it's Beyond Coaching. And Harrison, I know you have a copy of it there. You want to hold that up for those watching on the video. If you're not watching on the video, you can pick up this. Where can you pick up this book, Coach?
You can get that on Amazon.
Okay, so Amazon, Beyond Coaching, Coach Roz, Harrison Phillips, just Google them. You can also Google Donna Miesbach, because she's as much on that from what I've heard. She's kind of the brains behind the whole project. So, one of the things you talked about was in junior high, you were needing a lunch table one day, and you struck up a friendship with a couple guys. Can you share that story? Just give a little bit of insight into who you are.
Yeah, well, in our middle school, fairly large middle school, I think we had about 600 kids in the middle school, and big giant lunchroom, and just had like 4 very long tables. And so, if you went and sat at a certain section of the table, you really only got to be with about 3 or 4 people on your side and 3 or 4 people across. And we kind of had our normal clique of the football guys. We all played either for the middle school or for the club football. And that's what we had in common. Again, most of my relationships are sports driven, but there was a day that all the seats were kind of taken up. So maybe you'd go to, I have class with that group of kids. I'll go sit over there, whatever it is. But there was always a bunch of open spots next to the class that works with our kids with special needs in my middle school. And I have already had struck in some relationships with these kids with these developmental differences and special needs through my mom's stay-at-home daycare. And so I was very comfortable and really appreciated a lot of those relationships I had. They were great friendships of mine. And so I just sat down at the table, kind of awestruck the teacher and the paras that were working there at the time. I was like a well-known athlete in the school, and sat down and started to get to know some of my buddies. And so those relationships grew into going to me inviting them to my homecoming parties and then proms and things like that. So.
Yeah, I love that. That was just something that really, as I said to Coach right after that, I just said that told me a lot about you. In junior high, that's really the time, probably one of the most awkward time for dudes and young women. Just you're not really going and trying to make yourself stick out for not doing something cool, right? But from what I could tell, just from the way you told the story, the way the story panned out, is just you were hanging out with people, right? And that's what I've seen with how you're coaching, how you're doing this. It's not seeing them as different, not seeing them as they're this or that or the other thing. It's just these are people that God's put me in front of. Is that right? I mean, I don't know. That's just kind of how I read it.
Yeah, and absolutely. You could put me in front of anybody, and I feel like I can get something from that relationship. I mean, if I were going to sit down with an hour interview with somebody from death row, I bet I'd still learn something and gain something positive from that relationship and that idea. I know that's very extreme, but that's the way I look at these relationships. And again, when I think about some of the extremely remarkable values that are instilled in me, and some of the ones that I'm still working for, maybe insecure that I don't have enough of, a lot of times that's what our playmakers are, some of their strengths. And so if there's something that you want to work on, surround yourself with people who excel in those categories. And so, things like having a positive attitude, always looking at, things as the glass half full as opposed to half empty, doing things with a smile on your face, and then the courage to try new things and, to make other people feel comfortable, to empathize with others, things that I might not be as good as. I use the relationships I have with our playmakers and these kids because it's some of their biggest strengths. And so I'm not good at some things that they're good at. Maybe they don't excel at some things that I excel at. And so our relationship works together as we can compensate one another.
If I can pile on to a couple of the Harrison stories,
yes.
Oftentimes people will say, is an athlete really the guy that we see when the camera is rolling? And I'm going to share two short, quick stories with you. Harrison's senior year, he got to play in the Shrine game, which is really a privilege for a college athlete. And I called him up and I said, hey, so tell me how the Shrine, how was all of that? And the truth is, correct me if I'm wrong, Harrison, he was kind of frustrated because he wanted to spend more time. He didn't want picture ops with the kids. He wanted to spend more time in the hospital. And so it was kind of a frustrating experience for him, if I remember the story correctly. And then the second thing is I got to go back to Buffalo, and he took me immediately to the kids' hospital, and Harrison could run for mayor in Buffalo right now. And the people at the hospital knew him, and they knew him because he has been there many, many times before. And to go even further with that, Harrison goes into, and I hope you'll elaborate on this a little bit, Harrison. There's places in the hospital, that kid's hospital, that is not photo-friendly and not part of the visitors' tour. And that's where he wants to be. I mean, is he the guy that you see when the camera's not rolling? We could do 50 podcasts on Harrison stories. Right. But talk about the hospital stuff a little bit, would you, Harrison?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things when I was first getting my niche here in Buffalo. It's hard. There's so many different organizations. Do you want to partner with the Boys and Girls Club, with Special Olympics, with just go to a school and mentor kids? And that's kind of what I first did, was going to some elementary schools in inner city Buffalo, trying to talk to some kids. And then I went over to Oshai Children's Hospital, which is under Kaleida Health here in Buffalo, a huge healthcare chain up here. And within my first visit, within 2 halls, I'm like, okay, this is the place I'm going to go. Every off day, every evening in the OTAs, anytime I have free time, my girlfriend wasn't up here. Some guys were busy, so I just drive up to the hospital, shoot them a text and say, hey, I'm coming. And so we ended up calculating it. And then it was like I was going every other week for like 2 years straight. I was up there, over 50 times in a year or whatever. And so loved our relationship up there. Had different floors that I really appreciated going to. And sometimes other players would come with me, which was great. And then I reached out, and they were like, hey, you've been coming in here so much. We want to tell you about another place that we work with called High Point. And so this is an off-site place that takes over the lower floor of the retirement home, about a mile away from the hospital. And I don't want to get emotional because I do tear up every time that I think about the kids here. But long story short, it's a place where kids with genetic diseases and mutations and just, god-awful diseases from birth defects, whose families don't really want them. And it's the only area it's the only center in the area that have trach units. So most of the children have to be trached, are on ventilators 24/7, and need 24/7 surveillance. So when you have a family who is a single mother and can't afford an at-home caregiver, as much as she would like to come visit this child, she has to work all day and maybe a second job, maybe has other kids at home that aren't fetal alcohol syndrome or don't have this disease or this. And so, I'd go in and meet with this beautiful 4-year-old girl and Gloria, and we'd sit and I'd read her a book and hold her hand. And I'm like, so is Gloria's, or, so-and-so's family come in? And they say, they haven't been able to come in for over a year, or they haven't seen their family in 2 years. And it's just a devastating place. And it's heartbreaking that, places like that exist. But I'm so thankful that I was able to get out of my way and find a place like that. We've done some great work with them. Our Playmakers here sponsored an entire toy drive with 300-400 different Christmas toys that we got to bring. Our Playmakers wrote them each individualized Christmas cards with their names on it, addressed to them. We got to go and help unwrap the presents to them and everything. And so that's a place that's near and dear to my heart. But, as well as just visiting the normal hospital. Some of the best visits I have are when somebody's in there with a broken arm for the day, and he's just telling me how he was riding his bike and fell off or whatever. But anytime you can make someone's day, especially in the position that I am or we are as professional football players, like find a way to bless others.
Yeah, that's, as you said, Roz, I'm sure we could spend 50 episodes talking about Harrison stories, but we're not going to do that, folks, today. So, but what we are going to do now is we're going to just kind of shift gears a little bit. And I will say, first of all, though, it's just so encouraging to me. Your life, what you've done so far in your short life, and I could say that because I think I'm double your age at this point, which makes me feel really old. But
he's double your height.
But at least I'm not as old as Roz. Well, he's pretty much. I know he's double my height. There's no question about that. Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I'm pretty short and stocky, so I'm pretty. People can't believe how much I weigh. So that's a conversation for another day. I'm working on it, but anyway, what we're going to talk about now is how you're similar to Michael Jordan. So, which is you didn't make your freshman football team, right? So I think that's the story we keep talking about with Jordan. Not we, but you here. He didn't make his freshman basketball team, right? So, but that we're not necessarily talking about that, except how it has to do with your coaches, right? And the fact that this is the Coaching Character podcast, right? So we wanted people to get to know you, especially since you're going to be, hopefully, like I said, you're going to be able to be a part of this podcast further than just this episode. But one of the things you talk about in the book is really the difference that you've seen in your history of playing for lots of different coaches, the differences between the bad and the good coaches, right? And what have you seen distinguishes those, the two groups, so to speak? And obviously there's different, it's not like there's bad and good, but what are the qualities that you've seen in bad coaches and the qualities that you don't want to necessarily emulate, the qualities you've seen in good coaches that you do want to emulate, And, how has that really impacted your journey in sport?
Yeah, that's such a loaded question because it's so hard to unpack fully, right? And I think that's why we can do hours and hours of podcasts like this. We can do clinics, and we need you to come for hours for us to kind of really elaborate on that. But the long story short is the best year, the most fun I've ever had in my entire life playing sports was on my Pee Wee football team that went 0-9. And there was only 2 games that we scored a touchdown. So, that goes to show you that winning really isn't everything. Now, in my position, and nowadays, winning is everything. So it's a little bit different when it becomes your career. But when we're talking about the majority, the million of high school football players, the millions of middle school athletes, that was a huge takeaway when I look back at all the teams I've been on, the wrestling success that I've had, state qualifying football teams in high school, track, baseball, soccer, any of my sports. I had a lot of success in lots of them. But if I think about my favorite sports season, it was on a team that never won a game. And so I think that speaks a lot to the coach that I had at that time and how much he, preached still fundamentals of the game. You can make fundamentals as fun as you want. Anytime a fat guy gets to go catch a football, that's fun. And that's the fundamentals of football, right? Catching, throwing, tackling. So I think there's a lot with that. When it goes into coaching, I know you brought up, the last time we spoke about the difference between hedgehogs and foxes. And I think that's a good analogy with coaches. And some of the coaches that I would label as bad or didn't really mesh with me, approached every player through the same lens. Maybe they had a kid, let's say you got a 65-year-old coach, and when he was 35, one of his high school players went Division I and ended up playing in the NFL. Well, what happened, how you coached him 30 years ago, because you got that one kid to the NFL, you can't follow that mold and that model for all thousands of kids that you're going to work with ever since. And it's especially true working with female athletes. And so when you think about, there's some guys that you have to be hard on. There's somebody, when they work out, you have to watch them and count that they're going to do all 10 reps that is on the card for them to do. And then there's athletes that you don't have to worry about at all. They could be in a corner. Maybe the biggest thing for you is to tell them that they're good enough. They can pull back a little bit. So it's kind of like teachers, a very undervalued job because there's so much that goes into it. And, Coach Roz, one of my favorite quotes is, teachers teach until the time runs out, coaches coach until the skill is learned. And I think that's a perfect quote for any of the good coaches that I have. They were willing to stay after or go before. And when I talked about the hedgehog sees all the things through that one lens. And so that one guy that made it was because they pushed him super hard and made him run agility bags before practice. Well, that's all that their kids are going to do before practice. And then you got foxes, which kind of see things through different lenses and see things holistically. So when they look at an athlete, and I always speak football because that's the way I am, if I'm having 2 bad games in a row, a hedgehog says, well, we got to run them. We need to run gassers after practice because they're not conditioned. Well, the fox says, hey, didn't Harrison just break up with his girlfriend? Or did Harrison's dad just lose his job? Did Harrison just do bad on a test? Did he find out his ACT score wasn't what he thought it was going to be? Foxes are able to see, the bigger picture of things, the mental, the physical, the emotional, and adapt for each player. And that's hard when you have 100 guys on a football team. And that's why coaching should be a way more valued position. And when with some of the coaches who I anticipate coming to clinics that we might have or want to listen to Greg and I speak, like, I can't tell you it's not important to win football games. What coach wants to say, hey, well, I'm going to be fired if I don't win football games? Like there is a way to do that. I don't think we have time to go into it right now, but just to answer your question most blandly, those are some examples of good and bad coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'd say, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what you're saying here, and this is what I try to do. Greg didn't we haven't talked to you about this yet, but I actually coach high school girls soccer. So when you're saying that, especially with females, that resonates with me, right? But I think what you're saying here, and I also have 3 daughters, so that really resonates with me when I know I got to understand things that I don't necessarily understand naturally. But the idea of really studying your players and knowing them, knowing their personalities, knowing how they're wired, knowing what they're going through. Even when you were talking about the earlier, when you were talking about the camps, as you go in and you know that they have about, maybe you have a more positive attitude than you're necessarily wired for, or they have other skill sets that you were talking about, knowing that about them, right? So is that part of what you're saying here, is that you're studying your players, you're knowing them, and you're able to kind of individualize your coaching in the context of obviously practices that are more general? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the examples is, we have a track coach where I grew up, and he would coach the men and the women. And some of myself as well as other male, high school track runners loved him, favorite coach of all time. And there's females, he coached everyone the same way, females who cried, having to come, having their parents come in and talking to the principals about, the same coaching styles that you are getting, but for two completely different people. And so, I think what you summarized it very well.
Greg, any thoughts on that? Follow up on that?
Just and again, you hit it right when you said I'm sitting here like a proud dad. Harrison is just so mature beyond his years. The influence that he has, the position that he has, and what a thinker he is. A combination of a thinker with a huge heart is just amazing. And as the three of us are talking, and you're involved with orphan care, and Harrison cares deeply about foster kids, and I'm fumbling for words in just thinking about what the potential is when we've got somebody like this, and imagine if there's others like him, if he grows others. That's a long answer to the question.
Well, you're dreaming over there, which is what you do really well.
Yeah.
So, and that's awesome, because I think that's really what it does take, as you talk about in here. I mean, I can tell you're a dreamer too, not like in a La La Land dreamer, but a dreamer of, if we just take people who care, people who love well, and we work together, think of the impact we can have, think of the influence we could have. And if coaches see themselves as a conduit of transformation and a conduit of real, of flourishing, not just on the field, but flourishing of their players in life, that changes everything. So on that note, one of the things you said in here, a quote that I loved, it says, my story is different because the better coaches I had didn't push me. Most of the time they pulled me back or slowed me down. Can you explain what you meant by that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, having a big heart has been an extreme blessing in my life, because it's been the leading passion behind a lot of the work that I do, and the driving motivator to want to serve and go in the community and visit hospitals, or go to the vet, work with the VA, work with our kids, plan the events. I mean, I really feel like I have two jobs sometimes. A lot of NFL football players don't get this involved in the community because you have an NFL job to take care of. And so, I think that's been the biggest blessing about having a big heart. But one of the negative sides of that is that you wear your emotions on your sleeve oftentimes. And so, I get so emotional in my work, and, so much passion behind what I do. And sometimes that has identity issues, that I root myself as an athlete, but also just like the way I work. There were times that with some of the trainers I had, or some of the coaches, that I would get so upset with myself if I didn't believe I was working the hardest. If somebody stayed after practice later than I did, that would sit on, like, I couldn't go to sleep that night, or I'd want to throw up thinking that somebody was outworking me. And then I'd think about a wrestling opponent, and right now he's doing this, and I'm eating a bag of chips and he's working out right now. It just constantly was like, 24/7. I'm just worried, because I'm so passionate about it. Is that some of the coaches who ended up pulling me aside and slowing me back and teaching me about recovery, or teaching me about the mental side of confidence and what that can play in your game. And I just appreciated, I mentioned before, I'm not really one of those guys who needs the motivation. I don't need a yeller screaming at me to go hard. I'll find it internally. And so when a coach is doing that to me, that's their way to motivate. This is not the way that I'm motivated. And so, the way that some coaches got unique with motivating me was more of like I trust you. Like, you've got it. I believe in you. I believe in you. You're okay with where you are. Like, slow down. Don't overthink things. You can play free in my system. We love you. Our unconditional love for you is so great that you can be free in whatever you do. I love you enough that you can make mistakes, those types of things, instead of constantly worrying to try to be perfect because your coach is screaming down your neck.
To pile on to the answer, as I've observed Harrison, I got to go back to Buffalo for a thing called my cleats for my cause, and I got to meet one of the Buffalo Bills administrators. Wonderful guy, and he was telling me about Harrison, and he said, he's a rookie and we have to dial him back because he's so involved in so many things. Harrison is such a unique human in that he processes things quickly, differently. He can't leave things on the table if there's an assignment that he has to do. It's just amazing the pace that he runs at. And one of the things that you said early in your answer, I mean, you're horrible, Harry, and you're 6'4" and you're 305 pounds. You broke the NFL bench press record. He's a stud bolt, and yet he's an emotional guy. He'll cry like two women watching Steel Magnolias. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and that's what I love about him. We sit and we brainstorm together, and we're crying and sniveling and having a blast together.
I do not want to watch Steel Magnolias with you. I'm just going to tell you that right now. If you ask, you know the answer.
You think you aged yourself, because I don't even know what the hell that is.
Two. You and I are going to watch Steel Magnolias. That's going to be an assignment.
Man, oh man. No, you don't need to do that. You do not need to do that. So, with that, I think there's no way we could transition off of Steel Magnolias to the next topic with a good segue. So we're just going to, just own that and move on I just want to hear, we're going to wrap this up here in the next few minutes, but I just want to hear from you because, again, we're going to get more of you. And if you want more of these stories, if you want to go deeper into these things that Harrison was talking about, you can pick up that book, and I encourage you to pick up that book. If you're listening to this podcast, I can say this because I didn't have anything to do with that book, except I just read it. But you definitely want to pick up Beyond Coaching. If you're listening to this podcast, that's something that will help you, and it was something that will encourage you. It was something that will challenge you, and you can read more about what Harrison was just talking about, as well as some of the things that Roz has there, as well as different things you can learn ways to get deeper involved and have the Playmakers really get involved with helping you to incorporate these things and principles that we're talking about into your coaching. But with that, Harrison, what are your dreams for Harrison's Playmakers? What are your dreams for Playmakers as a whole and for other of your fellow NFL players, other professional athletes? I know you have a big vision for this. What are your dreams for it?
I mean, I think, if we're trying to be like goal-oriented and outcome-oriented, I would say, I would like to run the largest group of camps that works with the kids with developmental differences and special needs. I don't know if that's by head count, numbers. I know before this COVID stuff, we were going to work with over 1,000 kids this summer alone. And if we can grow, I worked with the Special Olympics here in Buffalo. Actually, it was a New York, all of New York Special Olympics, and there was 900 athletes there alone. And so if we could grow Omaha, Buffalo, California, Sacramento area, if we could get, 3 camps of 1,000 people, have to do a 3-day camp back to back to back in each city because there's so many kids. I think that would be the dream. And, obviously all cost free, all 100% free. And that's just the foot in the door so that, as many of those kids that can keep showing up at these events, we've had, I think that 10 events in Buffalo in the last 2 years, and that's with COVID. So we're trying to do 5 to 6 events a year in each city. Pretty much every other month, do a big event, kickball game, football camp, drive-in movie theater, whatever it is. And so I think that's probably the big picture for me. And then more than just the relationship of having kids come out and do a cool camp, the thing on the back burner of all this is now we get to show these kids, and I mentioned it earlier, how we all have our own strengths, we all have our own weaknesses. Some of the best qualities that the kids that we work with have bestowed upon me is the desire to want to help others and to serve. And that's a huge key component to what we are. We pay it forward and we give back. And so to help show the kids that we work with that I'm an NFL football player, I'm a playmaker, and I'm giving back. Let me show you how you can give back. Teaching, every time we speak in front of these kids, we talk about the smallest things: holding a door open, opening a door for someone, helping somebody with their groceries, the smallest little things that go the extra mile. And these kids want to get involved, they want to serve. And so, big picture, I hope that we have playmakers all over the world that are serving others, getting jobs, and helping our community overall.
So here's going to be my goodbye last question here it is. Harrison, with all of the resources that you have and the people that you're touching, you absolutely could have your own foundation, be doing everything yourself. Why Playmakers?
Well, I mean, the book kind of talks about that, but it just struck so organically. And as sad as it is, in my position, if you're a Division I football player, if you're an NFL football player, you got so many people reaching at you, you don't know which ones are right. And for some reason, as a skinny 18-year-old, didn't know anything, I decided to take a leap of faith. God called me, and I took a trip up with Coach Roz, and I found genuine people. And so to start this with you and to see the growth that we've had together, I mean, it's shared success. That's why I like football more than I like wrestling. It's because it's a team sport. You get to celebrate other people's success as well. And so the fact that we can grow, and the values that you had and instilled in me earlier when we first started meeting, and the work that you were doing with the kids, I was like, look at how hard this guy's working by himself. With the platform that I help to have, this thing can catch on like wildfire. And so that was a big reason that I stayed working with the Playmakers, and loved all my trips up to the Sacramento, Folsom area, all the people that we got to meet up at the church, or any of the camps that we were doing. I mean, everybody I met up there were fantastic. I miss a lot of those guys too. So, it's just, you always help the people that helped you. And this was, you just have to say it was kind of God sent, bigger than us.
Thanks. And this is as close as you're ever going to get to a quarterback.
So we're not going to, that pregnant pause was there for a reason. We're not going to get to that conversation. We'll have that offline. I'll let you guys take that up on your own. But I will say, one of the things that I heard you talking about, you threw out some numbers there, but what I heard and what I've read and what I know just hearing from Roz about you is it's not about the numbers, it's about the transformation of the individuals. Is that safe assumption?
Yeah, and that's why, our football camps are fantastic because they make for unbelievable content and they make great awareness. But the truth is that at our camp, when I had 250 kids, I wasn't able to pull each one and have a genuine conversation and teach. But when I do my smaller events, we have 30 or 40 kids come to a gathering, whatever. Those relationships are the longer lasting ones. So you definitely want to go for quality over quantity. But when you said dream big, I'd like to have 3,000 playmakers at my home that I FaceTime every day.
But what I'm going to encourage you is there's only one Harrison, but there's a Harrison that can multiply Harrison. Okay, and you have an opportunity to inspire because you're an inspirational dude. And I will tell you right now that you can build up a team like Roz has done with you, and I know Roz is working on doing as well. And between the two of you and others, as you get more and more on your team, you're going to be able to do those 20, 30-person ones. You're going to be able to do 130,000 people ones with 4 or 5 or 10 guys out there to be able to do it. And all of a sudden, you're going to have this multiplication effect that's going to be amazing. And I just can't wait to see it. because I can tell you right now, between what I know about Roz and, again, what he's told me about you and what I've read about you, and this isn't about a rah-rah session, as I said earlier, but I will tell you that this is the type of stuff, folks, those of you listening out there, this is the type of stuff that this mentality of it's more than us, it's bigger than us. These kids are on our team for a reason. And yes, this season matters, and I'm not saying that it doesn't matter. But what happens with these kids and with these young adults in your situation right now in the future is what's going to really transform society, what's going to transform their lives. And when you have an eternal perspective, it will transform eternity, right? So I just want to encourage you with that. And I just want to hear any thoughts you have, Harrison, any encouragement you have for people listening. And again, this isn't the last time we're going to be talking with you, but as we wrap this episode up, anything else you got to add?
I mean, I think, this is very productive. I think one thing in the book that's probably my favorite, it's my favorite quote. I say it everywhere, but just for the listeners, my favorite quote is, if you reach for the stars and you only get the clouds, you're still higher than everyone else. And so I think that's been, a reason that Greg and I have been very successful, always thinking, way out there. And, if we want to have a camp for 1,000 people in 50 states, well, we're probably not going to accomplish that. But if we have a camp for 500 people in 25 states, we've sure done a lot. So that's kind of what's got me to here.
Harrison, how can everybody follow you on social media? You're a social media guy and you respond to just about everybody. How do you want them to follow you?
If you just, I'm verified on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you type in Harrison Phillips, it should pop up first. But I think I'm Harrison Phillips 99 on Instagram, Horrible Harry 99 on Twitter, and just Harrison Phillips on Facebook. But like Coach said, I do like to interact with people who have genuine questions and want to get involved. So if you guys DM me, I normally will reply.
If you just Google Harrison Phillips and you find him on those different places, he's the really big guy that plays for the Bills. So if you see that picture, that's Harrison. There's probably some fake accounts out there, but, just look for the verified, as he says. I think it's a check or something. I don't know. I don't know all that stuff very well. But
get after Patrick Mahomes this week. Have a great game. I can't wait to see you, and I love you.
And thanks again, Harrison, for being with us, for taking the time. Thanks for your heart. Thanks for your encouragement. Thanks for your inspiration to so many. And folks out there, I do hope that you take all that you learned today, what you learned the last episode, and hopefully all future episodes, and you use all these things to help you to coach the character and to build the foundation for flourishing for your kids and all your players. So with all that,
thank you guys for listening.
And have a great week.